The late June sun, already a brutal monarch in the cloudless sky, baked the manicured lawns of Meadow Creek. Sarah wiped a bead of sweat from her brow, pushing a stray strand of auburn hair from her eyes as she wrestled with an overgrown rose bush. The scent of jasmine was heavy in the air, but it did little to soothe the simmering irritation that had been her constant companion for the past week. It had a name, a particularly grating, high-pitched name. Karen Albright. 4 or 5 years since Karen and her family had moved into the meticulously kept house directly across the street, Sarah's idyllic life in Meadow Creek had been slowly, subtly, systematically undermined. It started innocently enough. A borrowed cup of sugar that was never returned, a stray basketball retrieved from Sarah's pristine flower beds, a request to use the internet when their Wi-Fi was down. Sarah, a naturally accommodating person, had initially obliged. But the requests had morphed into demands, the casual intrusions into blatant disregard. The pool was the epicenter of their silent war. Sarah and her husband, Mark, had invested heavily in their backyard oasis, a large, kidney-shaped pool with a cascading waterfall feature, surrounded by flagstone and lush landscaping. It was their sanctuary, their escape from the summer heat, a place for quiet family weekends. To Karen, it was simply an extension of her own property, an amenity she felt inexplicably entitled to. It started with Leo, Karen's 14-year-old son, scaling the low fence to retrieve a toy. Then came the requests for playdates, which quickly became unsupervised swimming sessions. Karen would call, not to ask but to inform. Leo and his friend are just popping over for a dip, Sarah. So kind of you. Sarah, flustered and caught off guard, would reluctantly agree, only to find them splashing for hours, leaving a trail of wet towels and discarded juice boxes. When she finally put her foot down, installed a taller fence, and explained firmly that the pool was private, Karen had merely smiled, a saccharine, patronizing smile that said, "We'll see about that." The passive-aggressive attacks escalated. Mysterious dog droppings on her lawn, despite no dogs living on either property. Her sprinkler system inexplicably turned on full blast in the middle of a rainstorm. The strategically placed privacy shrubs along their shared property line pruned back unevenly, leaving glaring gaps. Sarah had tried reasoning, Mark had tried stern warnings, but Karen remained impervious, always maintaining an air of bewildered innocence, a master of plausible deniability. Then came the flyer. Sarah first saw it pinned to the community board at the local grocery store. A hastily printed, brightly colored sheet, adorned with clip art of splashing teenagers and a generic stock photo of a sparkling blue pool. The text, in bold, cheerful font, read, "Pool party at Leo's place. This Saturday 1 p.m. till Latith biggest bash of the summer. Come one, come all," and below, in slightly smaller, almost apologetic print, the address, 1422 Sycamore Lane. Sarah's house. Her blood ran cold. She stared at it, her mind refusing to process the brazen audacity. Leo's place. His pool. The entire school invited to her backyard. This wasn't just a transgression. It was an invasion, a declaration of war. She ripped the flyer from the board, crumpling it in her fist, her breath coming in ragged gasps. By the time she reached her car, her hands were shaking, a cold fury settling deep in her gut. She drove home, the crumpled flyer clutched tight, the word invasion echoing in her mind. Mark was in the living room, absorbed in a golf tournament, when she burst through the door. "Mark!" she exclaimed, throwing the crumpled paper onto the coffee table. "You will not believe this." He blinked, pulling off his reading glasses. "What is it, honey? Did the HOA send another passive-aggressive note about the mailbox color?" "Worse," she seethed, smoothing out the flyer. "Much, much worse. Look. Mark picked it up, his brow furrowing as he read. The smile slowly slid from his face, replaced by a look of bewildered shock, then dawning anger. 1422 Sycamore Lane, he read aloud, his voice low. That's our address. Leo's place? He looked up at Sarah, his eyes wide with disbelief. Did he actually invite the entire school to our house? Yes, Mark. He did. Sarah paced the room, her voice rising. Without a word to us. Without a shred of permission. This is beyond unacceptable. This is an act of war. Mark stood up, the remote control forgotten. I'm going over there, he declared, his jaw tight. Right now. Karen has gone too far this time. No, wait, Sarah said, grabbing his arm. A different kind of thought was beginning to form, cold and precise, in the back of her mind. Let me handle this. I've dealt with Karen's innocent manipulations for years. This is my fight. He hesitated, seeing the first car, a battered sedan overflowing with 5 boisterous teenagers, pulled up to 1422 Sycamore Lane promptly at 12:55 p.m. Sarah, perched at her kitchen window with a mug of herbal tea, felt a jolt of adrenaline. It was starting. She watched as they piled out, loud and laughing, already shedding their hoodies to reveal swimsuits underneath. They looked across the street at Karen's house, then back at hers, a flicker of confusion crossing their faces. One of them, a lanky boy with an array of piercings, consulted his phone, then shrugged, leading the charge toward Sarah's front door. A moment later, the doorbell chimed. Sarah took a deep breath. Mark, who had been nervously fiddling with the TV remote in the living room, looked at her, his face pale. This is it, he mumbled. Sarah opened the door, a polite, almost serene expression on her face. The teenagers, a mix of curious and impatient, looked expectant. Hi, the pierced boy said, a slight swagger in his stance. Is this Leo's place? For the pool party. Sarah's smile tightened just a fraction. Oh dear. There seems to have been a bit of a misunderstanding. This is 1422 Sycamore Lane, my home. Leo lives across the street at 1423. And as for a pool party, she paused, letting her gaze drift pointedly toward her empty backyard, visible through the wide-open gate. Well, as you can see, there isn't much of a pool to party in today. The teenagers followed her gaze. Their faces, initially confused, morphed into expressions of disbelief, then dawning disappointment. The lanky boy's swagger deflated instantly. Empty, he blurted. Dude, Leo said it was gonna be epic. He showed pictures. Sarah offered a sympathetic, if somewhat theatrical, sigh. I'm truly sorry for the confusion. Perhaps you should check with Leo. I believe he's expecting guests, just not here, and perhaps not with this particular amenity. One of the girls, her eyes wide, pointed. Wait, isn't that Karen's kid, Leo? Sarah looked across the street. Leo Albright, dressed in neon swim trunks and a brand-new Hawaiian shirt, was indeed strutting out of his house, a triumphant grin on his face. He waved enthusiastically at the arriving group, already anticipating the adulation. His mother, Karen, followed him, holding a tray laden with brightly colored drinks, a similar smug satisfaction on her features. She caught Sarah's eye across the street, her smile unwavering, a silent challenge. The group of teenagers, now thoroughly bewildered, mumbled their apologies to Sarah and slowly ambled across the street, their previous excitement replaced by palpable uncertainty. Leo's grin faltered as he saw their confused faces, his eyes scanning past them to Sarah's conspicuously dry pool. What's up, guys? Leo chirped, trying to inject enthusiasm into his voice. Ready to party? Dude, where's the pool? The Pierce boy asked, gesturing vaguely toward Sarah's yard. Your mom just said there's no pool. Leo's head whipped around. His eyes, usually bright with adolescent confidence, bugged out. He saw it then, the vast, desolate crater where a shimmering oasis had been just yesterday. His Hawaiian shirt suddenly felt too tight. Karen, following his gaze, dropped the tray of drinks. Plastic cups bounced across the driveway, spilling their sugary contents in vibrant rivulets. A collective gasp went up from the small but growing crowd. More cars were arriving, teenagers spilling onto the street, all headed for what they thought would be the ultimate summer bash. They saw Leo's house, then Sarah's. They saw the confusion, the dropped tray, and the undeniable, glaring absence of a pool. Karen's face, usually so composed in its false sweetness, crumpled. Her eyes, wide with disbelief and horror, darted from her son to the empty pool, then to Sarah, who stood calmly watching from her doorway. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the chirping of cicadas and the distant thrum of arriving vehicles. Then the murmurs began. Is that the pool? It's empty. What the heck? Disappointment rippled through the burgeoning crowd, quickly morphing into irritation. Leo, now bright red, stammered, it's a surprise. Yeah, it's like a dry party. A new trend. His voice cracked pathetically. Karen, regaining a sliver of her usual defiance, rounded on Sarah. Sarah, what have you done? Her voice was shrill, cutting through the growing chatter. Sarah merely raised an eyebrow. Done, Karen? I haven't done anything. My pool, my property. I simply decided to, shall we say, undergo some unscheduled maintenance. After all, it is my pool. She emphasized the word my with a precision that cut through the distance. The statement hung in the air, a clear, unmistakable declaration. The teenagers, many of whom knew the long-standing, unspoken rivalry between the two households, exchanged knowing glances. Leo's face was a mask of utter mortification. His grand plan, his bid FO. The day after the infamous dry pool party, an unsettling quiet settled over Meadow Creek. It was the kind of quiet that precedes a storm, a tension humming beneath the surface of seemingly normal suburban life. Sarah, despite her initial satisfaction, felt it acutely. Karen Albright was not a woman who forgave, nor one who forgot. The public humiliation inflicted upon her and Leo was a wound too deep for a simple apology or a cooling-off period. That Sunday morning, Sarah made coffee, the aroma doing little to dispel the lingering unease. She glanced out the kitchen window, across the street, expecting to see some sign of activity from Karen's house. There was none. The blinds were drawn, the driveway empty of the usual Sunday morning car wash ritual. It was almost too quiet. They're probably plotting, Mark said, entering the kitchen, his voice low, as if Karen might hear. He poured himself a mug, his eyes also flicking towards the silent house. She wouldn't just let this go. You know Karen. Sarah nodded, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. I know. But what can she do? We didn't break any laws. It's our property. Karen doesn't play by laws, honey. She plays by perceived slights, Mark countered. And that was a pretty big slight. Later that day, a strange car, a dark, nondescript sedan, was parked a few houses down from Karen's, its occupants observing. Sarah noticed it on her afternoon walk. Then, the next day, a small, handwritten sign appeared on the community bulletin board at the park, just beneath an outdated flyer for a lost cat. It read, Warning, neighbor known for spiteful actions. Avoid 1422, Sycamore Lane. There was no name, no signature, just the address. Sarah felt a surge of cold anger. It was petty, passive-aggressive, vintage Karen. Mark scoffed when he saw it. She's trying to poison the well. Don't worry about it, everyone knows Karen's dramatics. But the next incident wasn't so easily dismissed. Sarah's car, parked in her driveway, suddenly developed a persistent, high-pitched squeal whenever she hit the brake. Taking it to the mechanic, she was informed that small, almost imperceptible nicks had been made in her brake lines, allowing air to slowly seep in. Could have been dangerous, ma'am, the mechanic said, shaking his head. Looks like someone tampered with it. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It was one thing for Karen to be verbally abusive or spread rumors. It was another entirely to tamper with something that could have put Sarah and Mark's lives at risk. Mark, when he heard, was furious. That's it. I'm calling the police. This is beyond petty revenge, this is criminal. They filed a police report, but without direct proof, it was just a suspicion. The officer took their statement, looked at the history of neighborly disputes, and advised them to install security cameras. It's often hard to prove these things without concrete evidence, especially with ongoing feuds, he'd said, his tone sympathetic but resigned. The security cameras were installed the following day, motion-activated and covering every angle of their property. Sarah felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. Their peaceful home had become a battleground, a fortress under siege. Then came the anonymous calls. Not to their landline, which they rarely used, but to Sarah's cell phone. The calls were silent, lasting just long enough for Sarah to say hello twice before hanging up. They came at odd hours. Late at night, early in the morning, always from an unknown number. It was unsettling, a constant reminder that Karen was out there, watching, waiting. Mark suggested blocking the numbers, but they were always different. She's trying to get under your skin, honey, he'd said, pulling her close. Don't let her. That's what she wants. But it was getting under her skin. Sarah found herself jumping at shadows, checking locks twice, and scanning her rearview mirror with increasing frequency. Her once calm demeanor was replaced by a simmering alertness. One Tuesday afternoon, Sarah was working in her garden, replanting some petunias near the front porch. She heard a car slow down, then stop. Looking up, she saw Mrs. Henderson, a sweet, elderly neighbor who lived 2 streets over, peering at her with a troubled expression. "Sarah, dear," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice gentle, I heard about the pool party. And Karen told me that you emptied your pool because Leo accidentally splashed her prize-winning orchids, and you were so angry you ruined the whole party just to spite him." Sarah dropped her trowel. "What? That's not true. Karen invited the entire school to our house without permission." Mrs. Henderson wrung her hands. "Oh dear. She said you were just being mean. And she also mentioned something about you always having an issue with her plants. She said you even moved some of them over the property line once." Sarah stared. The flickering image on the screen, the distinct hummingbird emblem on the hoodie, burned into Sarah's mind. It wasn't just a symbol, it was a smoking gun. Mark's tire, now undeniably slashed, was the tangible proof they had desperately needed. The shadowy figure, Tiffany, Leo's girlfriend, was an accomplice drawn into Karen's vortex of spite. "Tiffany," Mark breathed, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and outrage. "That little, she actually did it?" Sarah nodded, her jaw tight. "It looks like it. Or Karen coerced her. Either way, we have footage of someone tampering with our car. And that emblem is pretty damning evidence of who it probably is." She replayed the clip, pausing at the clearest frame. The angle was tricky, but the hummingbird was unmistakable. We need to go to the police now, Mark insisted, reaching for his phone. This isn't just a neighborly dispute anymore. This is criminal damage, and it's escalating. Wait, Sarah said, stopping him. The police already dismissed the brake line incident. They want concrete evidence. This is concrete, but it's still circumstantial against Karen directly. If it's Tiffany, they might see it as teenage mischief, not Karen's orchestrated attack. We need more. Mark looked at her, confused. More? What more do we need, Sarah? We have video evidence of someone slashing my tire. We need to connect Tiffany's actions directly to Karen, Sarah explained, her mind already racing through possibilities. Otherwise, Karen will just play the innocent victim, claiming she had no idea what her son's overzealous girlfriend was doing. She'll throw Tiffany under the bus without a second thought, and Tiffany, being a teenager, might even take the fall to protect Leo or avoid Karen's wrath. So, what's the plan? Mark asked, running a hand through his hair. The initial surge of triumphant anger was giving way to a more strategic, albeit dangerous, calm. We go in prepared, Sarah stated, her gaze fixed on the monitor. We can't just present this to the police and expect them to magically unravel Karen's web. We need to build a stronger case, tie it all together. The brake lines, the signs, the online reviews, and now this. And the only way to do that is to get them to expose themselves. Over the next few days, Sarah and Mark meticulously documented every incident. They saved screenshots of the negative online reviews for Mark's business, printing out the anonymous sign from the park bulletin board, gathering the mechanic's report on the brake lines. Sarah also spent hours reviewing all the security footage, looking for any other anomalies, any other shadows that might connect Karen or Leo more directly to the attacks. The tension in Meadow Creek was palpable, even if unspoken. Neighbors who used to wave enthusiastically now offered tentative nods, their eyes darting between Sarah's house and Karen's. The pool, still an empty concrete shell, remained a silent testament to the war. Leo, after the pool party fiasco, was rarely seen. Tiffany, however, still drove past Sarah's house almost daily, sometimes with Leo, sometimes alone. Each time she passed, Sarah watched the footage of the hummingbird emblem, a cold certainty growing in her. Sarah decided they needed to go directly to Tiffany, but not in a confrontational way. Not yet. She needed to understand the dynamic, to see if Tiffany was a willing participant or a pawn. One afternoon, Sarah spotted Tiffany at the local coffee shop, hunched over a textbook, a cheerleading hoodie draped over the back of her chair. Sarah approached cautiously, a friendly, almost concerned expression on her face. "Tiffany?" "Hi," Sarah said, her voice soft. "I hope you don't mind me saying hello." Sarah from across the street. Tiffany looked up, startled. Her eyes, usually bright, were shadowed. "Oh. Hi, Mrs. Miller." She seemed uncomfortable, her gaze flicking nervously towards the door. "I just wanted to check in," Sarah continued, keeping her tone gentle. "Things have been a little rough between our families lately, and I'm concerned. You seem like a sweet girl, and I wouldn't want you to get caught up in something that's not really yours." Tiffany's face went a shade paler. I don't know what you mean, Mrs. Miller." Sarah leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "Tiffany, we have security cameras. They caught someone slashing Mark's tire the other night. And the person, well, they were wearing a very distinctive hoodie. A cheerleading hoodie with a hummingbird emblem." Tiffany's eyes widened, a flicker of panic in their depth. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked like a trapped animal. I wasn't there," she stammered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know anything about that." "Tiffany, please," Sarah said, her voice still gentle. but with an underlying firmness. I understand how difficult it can be when you're trying to impress someone, or when someone you care about asks you to do something. The digital battlefield of the Meadow Creek residents' Facebook group was ablaze. Karen's post, with its carefully crafted victim narrative and the blurry photo of Sarah and Tiffany, had ignited a firestorm of comment. Sarah scrolled through them, a grim expression on her face. Some were supportive of Karen, echoing her outrage at bullying a teenager. Others were skeptical, recalling the long-standing animosity between the two women. A few, bravely, questioned Karen's version of events, but they were quickly drowned out by the tide of indignation she had whipped up. "She's a master manipulator," Sarah muttered, showing Mark the latest comments. "She's turned it into a witch hunt against me, using Tiffany as bait." Mark ran a hand over his face. "This is exactly what we wanted to avoid. Now, if we go to the police, she'll just claim we're retaliating for her, exposing us." "Exactly," Sarah agreed, a dangerous glint in her eyes. "But she also made a crucial mistake. She underestimated me. And she just gave us an audience." The next morning, Sarah contacted Tiffany. The girl was distraught, having seen Karen's post. "Mrs. Miller, everyone's looking at me weird," Tiffany whimpered over the phone. "Karen's telling people I'm lying, that you're forcing me to say things." "Tiffany, listen to me," Sarah said, her voice firm but reassuring. "Karen is trying to control the narrative. But you have the truth, and the truth is powerful. Are you still willing to tell the police what really happened?" There was a moment of silence, then a shaky breath. "Yes," Tiffany finally said, her voice small but resolute. "I don't want to be involved in this anymore. I just want it to stop." "Good," Sarah said, a plan solidifying. "We're going to the police, but we're also going to set the record straight for the neighborhood. Karen wants a public fight? She's going to get one." Sarah and Mark spent the rest of the morning at the police station. This time they came armed. They presented the security footage of Tiffany slashing Mark's tire, the clear image of the hummingbird emblem. They showed the mechanic's report detailing the tampered brake lines, along with Tiffany's tearful, detailed testimony. Tiffany, initially hesitant, found her voice as she recounted Karen's threats and manipulations, describing how Karen had coerced her into damaging both vehicles and planting the anonymous signs. The police officer, the same one who had taken their initial, skeptical report, listened intently. The video evidence, coupled with Tiffany's direct confession and the clear link to Karen's bullying, changed everything. "This is substantial," he said, his expression grim as he watched the tire-slashing footage again. "This moves beyond neighborly disputes into criminal acts and potential endangerment." They asked Tiffany if she was willing to make a formal statement, which she agreed to. The officer assured her that her cooperation would be noted, and that steps would be taken to protect her from Karen's retribution. Leaving the police station, Sarah felt a mixture of relief and renewed determination. The legal process was now in motion. But Karen's Facebook post still festered, poisoning the community's perception. Sarah knew she couldn't let it stand. That afternoon, Sarah crafted her own post for the Meadow Creek residents' Facebook group. She didn't engage in Karen's histrionics or emotional pleas. Instead, she presented facts, calm and irrefutable. She started by sharing a crystal-clear screenshot of the security footage, focusing specifically on the hummingbird emblem on the hoodie. Accompanying it was a still from the same footage, zoomed in on Mark's now flat tire. Her caption read, "Regarding recent events misinformation, dear Meadow Creek neighbors, it has come to my attention that certain individuals are attempting to spread misinformation and make false accusations regarding my family and me. While I prefer to handle matters privately, the recent escalation to criminal acts and public smear campaigns leaves me no choice but to address this openly. On the date of tire slashing. Our security cameras captured footage of an individual slashing the tire of Mark's car. The attached image shows this incident clearly. We have identified the individual, who was wearing a distinctive Meadow Creek High School cheerleading hoodie with a hummingbird emblem. This act of vandalism follows a pattern of harassment and property damage, including the tampering with our vehicle's brake lines, which could have led to serious injury. We also have evidence of anonymous signs being posted and malicious online reviews targeting Mark's business. We have presented all this evidence, including the full, unedited security footage and testimony from the individual involved, to the Meadow Creek Police Department. A formal investigation is underway. It is deeply regrettable that an impressionable young person was coerced into these actions. The aftermath of Sarah's Facebook post was swift and brutal for Karen. The digital outrage spilled over into real-world consequences, creating a social firestorm that engulfed the Albright household. Karen's phone was indeed ringing off the hook, not with sympathetic calls, but with angry parents, concerned school officials, and the relentless curiosity of a community suddenly privy to her malicious machinations. The first tangible blow came from the Meadow Creek High School. Tiffany, emboldened by Sarah's support and her own desire for redemption, had given a full statement to the police, detailing Karen's manipulation and threats. This testimony, combined with the security footage, prompted the school administration to act. Tiffany was placed on probation from the cheerleading squad and given community service, but Leo faced a harsher reality. He was suspended from school for a week for his role in instigating the unauthorized party and for encouraging Tiffany's actions. More significantly, his aspirations for student council, the very reason Karen had been so desperate for him to appear popular, were shattered. The school made it clear that a student involved in such a scandal, especially one tied to criminal behavior, would not be considered for leadership positions. But the professional fallout for Karen was even more severe. Her meticulously cultivated image in the community was her shield, her weapon. Now it was utterly compromised. She was a prominent member of several local committees, including the HOA board. Within days, emails circulated, then formal letters, requesting her resignation from all positions. The allegations of coercion, property damage, and putting lives at risk were too serious for the committees to ignore. Her carefully constructed network of influence crumbled. One crisp autumn afternoon, a few weeks after the initial eruption, Sarah was in her newly refilled pool, enjoying a peaceful swim. The water, clear and blue, shimmered invitingly. The pool lights glowed gently, a stark contrast to the darkness that had once filled its basin. The security cameras still silently watched, but now they were a comfort, not a burden. Suddenly, she heard a car pull into Karen's driveway. It wasn't Karen's sleek SUV or Leo's beat-up sedan. It was a moving truck. A large, unmistakable moving truck, followed by a second, smaller one. Sarah paused her swim, pushing herself to the edge of the pool. She watched, a slow, dawning realization spreading through her. Karen. They were moving. Over the next few hours, movers bustled in and out of 1423 Sycamore Lane, carefully packing boxes into the waiting truck. Karen, pale and gaunt, her usual bright clothing replaced by a drab sweatsuit, directed them with a weary resignation. Leo, sullen and silent, helped load a few boxes, his head down, avoiding eye contact with anyone, especially Sarah's house. Tiffany was nowhere to be seen. Mark joined Sarah by the pool. He had heard the commotion too. "Looks like they're making a quick exit," he observed, a note of quiet triumph in his voice. The pressure must have been immense. Sarah nodded, a strange mix of emotions swirling within her. There was relief, certainly. The endless cycle of petty aggressions and dangerous retaliation was finally over. But there was also a tinge of something else. Not pity, but a recognition of the devastating scale of Karen's self-inflicted downfall. She had sought to destroy Sarah's peace, and in doing so, had utterly dismantled her own life. As dusk began to fall, the last boxes were loaded. The movers slammed the truck doors shut. Karen walked slowly around her now empty house, doing a final check. Her gaze, for a fleeting moment, landed on Sarah's backyard, on the shimmering blue of the pool. There was no defiance in her eyes now, only a raw, defeated emptiness. Her shoulders slumped. She turned and climbed into the passenger seat of her SUV, which Leo was already starting. The engine rumbled to life. Without a backward glance, the SUV pulled out of the driveway, followed by the two moving trucks, turning down Sycamore Lane and disappearing from view. Silence descended upon Meadow Creek once more. But this time it was a peaceful, healing silence. The air felt lighter, the tension finally broken. Sarah and Mark stood by their pool, watching the empty house across the street. The blinds were open now, revealing barren rooms. The perfect facade of 1423, Sycamore Lane was gone, replaced by a vacant shell. "It's over," Mark said softly, squeezing Sarah's hand. Sarah looked at her pool, reflecting the deepening twilight. The water was still, serene. "Yes," she agreed, a profound sense of peace settling over her. "It's finally over." Justice had been served, not with a bang, but with the quiet, undeniable weight of truth and consequences. Karen's grand, audacious scheme to humiliate Sarah had ultimately led to her own public downfall and an unceremonious exit from Meadow.